everyone. Welcome back to the Warrior Athletica channel, where today's topic of discussion is going to be emergency preparedness via water and via antibiotics and medical kits. This conversation is brought to you via the Mavericks Project, mavericksproject.org. We are a mastermind of freedom-minded individuals that love personal freedom, financial freedom, and physical freedom. And we combine all that into mastermind events all across the globe. Our next event is in November, and we're having it in Dallas, Texas, and it's going to be a great meeting of the minds. Today I have with me Dr. Motsinger. He is a wonderful doctor who is going to do some explanation and lend some credibility into what I'm saying, because I do have a lot of experience in the health and fitness world with over 20 years of personal training experience, but Dr. Motsinger is an actual doctor who can write prescriptions. So welcome to the show, Dr. Motsinger. If you wouldn't mind, just do a brief introduction of what you do, who you are, and we'll move from there.
Great. Thanks for having me today. I'm actually grew up in Dallas, Texas, where the mastermind's going to be. So, welcome home to everybody there. Grew up in Dallas. I went to the Air Force Academy, then the military medical school in the Washington, D.C. area. I did a combined residency in family medicine and psychiatry, 5-year residency, and then was in the military for 25 years. I've been in clinical practice for 27 years. Was residency director of the combined family medicine psychiatry residency at points of training other doctors doing this. And in the last days working with the Mavericks, kind of helping people with their medical preparedness and using the knowledge and experience that I've gained over those years in clinical practice in the military to help people out. So thanks for having me.
Oh, well, we love to have you. And as part of this channel is Warrior Athletica, I like to have lots of expertise on the channel to talk about various things that I believe are critically important, especially in these times. Ever since, let's say, 2020 happened, we discovered how important it is to be medically informed and have informed consent. And so when we're on this particular subject of antibiotics and water purification and emergency preparedness, there's a lot of confusion out there. What do I do? How do I do it? Because me being based in Florida, we are a hurricane kind of state. Thank goodness we haven't had any this year. But during a hurricane, people say, oh, I know I need water. And they buy water, but they buy maybe 2 or 3 cases of water, and then they think they're good. And they buy it for the whole family, not knowing that you just need more than 2 or 3 cases of water to drink, but you need it for other things as well. So I like to say, what if a hurricane wipes out your power grid, or a cyber attack, which has happened, contaminates your water supply? In just 72 hours, you could be fighting for your life, not from the storm, but from dehydration, infection, and deadly bacteria. That's why these two go hand in hand. And so a lot of the stuff I've learned is from being a first responder and being in the law enforcement community, having to know medical scenarios, emergency survival scenarios, trauma scenarios. And then I found this book, which I'll put in the description, which gave me a comprehensive list of what I should have, being knowing that from a first responder side, that first responders aren't always able to help you in the case of an emergency. And because a lot of times we are helping other serious stuff, or we're bogged down ourselves and we can't respond because we're dealing with our families and things. So Dr. Motsinger, why is an emergency water supply non-negotiable in any disaster prep plan?
If you because it will keep you alive. How about that? We'll start with that. There's a recent video by RFK Jr. It's a really good explanation of it, but he described how the life expectancy and disease rates in the Western populations have gone down over the last 200 years, and he showed the graphs, and you'd like to think, oh, it's vaccines, oh, it's all this great medicine, antibiotics that we have. And actually, there was a landmark study in 1977 that talked about the reduction in disease burden that we've had, and increased life expectancy is really from basic sanitation. It's from having reliable sources of clean water and being able to get rid of human waste. So when you're in that emergency situation, the grid goes down, the water stops flowing out of the tap. You will, number one, people will go to whatever water source they have, and then typically those water sources will be contaminated. Then they will get gastrointestinal illnesses, which, if leading to dehydration, can be fatal. So everybody thinks, okay, I need 3 months worth of food, et cetera, et cetera. You will die of dehydration way before you will die of starvation. So clean water, not only to drink, but for sanitation purposes of washing your hands, washing your cooking utensils, et cetera, and getting rid of human waste is really the foundation of surviving in that near term.
Okay, so let's talk first about if we are in this situation and our water has stopped or our water has become, let's say, a boil water alert or just undrinkable or unpotable for any reason. One thing that we do here in Florida, or which I recommend in Florida, is if you know an emergency is coming, or I mean, a lot of times you do know that it's coming, but sometimes you don't. But if you do know that it's coming, you might want to purchase something like this. This is a water bob, and basically this lines your bathtub with a sterile bag that you fill in advance of when your water goes out. And this stores up to 100 gallons of fresh drinking water. 100 gallons you could do a lot with, and you can make it stretch for maybe a week if you have like a family of 3 or 4 or so, if you do it right. And this way, you don't have to worry about filtering that because it's already from your tap water, which should be at least remotely safe to drink. Let's call it that. And then you can have a rain catchment barrel outside your home. And I talked about emergency preparedness in my Substack, which is Athena Angelique at Substack.com. And it includes just rain catchment methods, ways to use umbrellas and rain barrels that take your gutter water and store the water there. Now, you would have to filter that. But again, this is pure water from the sky. It may not be contaminated with like radiation because it's a sealed barrel, but those are other ways. Now, if you decide to bug out, besides water tablets, Dr. Motsinger, what do you think a person should carry?
Yeah, I think when you're looking at emergency preparedness, the first decision is, okay, am I in a bug out scenario or am I in a shelter in place scenario? So if you're in a location to where you can shelter in place, you're out in the country or you're in a good environment, you've got a lot of options like you just talked about. But let's say you live in the city and maybe you're in a condo, an apartment, if you're in a bad situation, you probably are not going to want to stay there. So in your bug out kit, you're going to want some things, but you have a very limited amount of weight that you can carry. So you have to think about that. So some of those water treatment tablets, they've got all kinds of tablets that you can have, but some of those with you. Another important thing that I would have in your bug out kit is a filter. They've got some really, really good filters, and again, there's great resources for this that will filter out almost all the bacteria, the viruses, everything that you would want out of water. And you basically can show up to a pile of sludge and you can filter the water and get good drinking water out of it. They are typically, you can hold them in your hands and they're very effective. So I would have a mobile like camping filter with me, and then I would have some water treatment tablets with me as well. And I also have, I'm going to hold it up here. The I would have a small version of that of some kind of medical reference source in your bug out kit because that will help you understand what you need to do, tell you what tablets you would need to use for water, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, because the ratio, they say you don't want to carry a bug out bag that is more than 25% of your body weight. So you really want to keep that in mind. It's not like you can carry gallons of water with you if you got to hike for who knows how long, or even just ride your bike or go across rough terrain. It depends on where you live, obviously, but if you're really trying to escape humanity or whatever the disaster is beyond, let's say, Western North Carolina, you'd have to go many miles just to get out of potential flood disaster areas. And you don't know, let's say the disaster happened to carry you away miles and miles. If you have that bug out bag and you seal stuff in Ziploc bags like that survival guide, and your water filters and your water tabs are in those packets, you should be okay. So you always have to think about what weight can I reasonably carry for who knows how long of a period of time. And so getting back in our one of our prior conversations, you mentioned that there was a hydration solution. Can you talk a little bit more about hydration solutions?
Right. So let's talk about those early problems that you're going to face. So within those first couple of days, you're going to have, I mean, people who aren't prepared are going to drink dirty water. They're not going to have proper sanitation. And even people that you're with, if you've got those things, you can pick up those gastrointestinal illnesses. Now, a lot of those are going to be viruses. Some of them are bacterial as well, but initially you're not going to know the difference. So that's one reason to have a good medical reference with you is to try to figure out the difference. But when the natural thought that you're probably going to have, a layperson would have, is someone's vomiting and they have diarrhea. We need to stop the vomiting and the diarrhea. and that's a good thought. But the body is trying to get rid of something that's in its GI tract. So a lot of times the most important thing isn't to stop the vomiting or the diarrhea, it's to maintain hydration. It's do not get dehydrated. So you will you will have, if you look at underdeveloped countries and you look at areas of Africa, the children have a very high mortality rate. What do they end up dying of? Because they don't have clean drinking water and sanitation. They die of dehydration from gastrointestinal illnesses. And that's why there's a huge, in the WHO, I'm sure there's probably a couple of non-evil people in that organization, but one of the good things that they did was they have a formulation of an oral rehydration solution. So basically electrolytes, something that you would need to rehydrate appropriately in the setting of copious amounts of vomiting or diarrhea. So those hydration kits, you're going to have to, again, the foundation is the clean water, but then you take that electrolyte solution that you put back into the water, and then you slowly give that to someone. When we think about hydration, we think about getting a large volume of liquids into the person to keep them hydrated. That's not going to work if the person has vomiting. Your small amounts of liquid, so even like teaspoon amounts of liquid, as just frequently. You don't want to distend the stomach. You don't want to irritate the stomach because you're going to get your fluid right back out. But in your, again, depending on, is this a bug out bag or is this a shelter in place? In the shelter in place, you definitely, I would have some oral rehydration solution because that can be life-saving in these environments.
Now, would you suggest if somebody bugs out, would you, well, I guess they could use it if they bug into a powder, like a liquid IV, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, most of these, the oral rehab, yeah, I would definitely, you're going to want the powders, okay? Because like a typical constituted rehydration solution for kids is called Pedialyte, right? Everybody's heard of that. Well, okay, like I had a 3-day earthquake bag that I ordered, and the thing weighed, I don't know how many pounds, but it was on rollers because it weighed so much. The majority of the weight was actually water. So if you've got a filter, if you have tablets, you can access water in multiple places, filter it, and then add the solution to it. So I wouldn't carry, you know, liquid forms of oral rehydration solution. I honestly, I wouldn't even have them in a shelter in place scenario. I would make sure you can give access to clean water, whether a source, whether that's tablets or through filters, and then make sure that you've got some kind of powdered rehydration solution available.
Okay. And so, we covered the water pretty extensively, and there's also something called the zero water pitcher, which I have, which you could buy and stock up on tons of filters, which would kind of almost do the sludge thing that you're talking about with if you're on the road. This has like been proven to filter, rainwater from the street and pond water and things like that, and be relatively good because it comes with this zero water pitcher comes with a dipstick digital thing that determines like the parts per million and will tell you like how good of a job that it filtered. And I've actually tried it on different bottled waters just to test. And the zero water pitcher every single time over any bottled water that I've tried literally reads zero. So that one's a really, really good at-home water solution that you could stock up on the filters for. And I think one filter will give you 100 pitchers of water, which is amazing. Now that we've talked about water, let's talk about
Can I,
antibiotics.
yeah, let me say one more thing on the water scenario. Um, Another thing people don't think about in this, they think about drinking water, right? But you're also going to want, you got to think about the volume that you're going to need because you need to wash your cooking utensils and your hands in clean water as well. Okay, so this is basic sanitation. There's classic examples of, medical school when they told us about diarrheal outbreaks that happened in the military and how it wiped out whole units, took them offline because someone was preparing the salad bar and wasn't washing their hands after they went to the bathroom. So everybody thinks about water for drinking, but you've got to have clean water and to wash your hands, wash your cooking utensils, because that is just as important.
Well, and for wound care as well, because
Absolutely.
you have to sometimes flush out wounds, and sure, alcohol and iodine and all those things are great, but you have to clean the surface first.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. And also you need water to cook. So let's just say you have, beans and rice, and you've stored a lot of beans and rice because you've listened to prepper channels, and this is a cheap prep item. Well, you're going to need water to cook that stuff in, and we look at the humanitarian crisis that occurred now in Gaza, where let's just say humanitarian aid did get through. Well, they were giving these children and families beans and rice is almost like a slap in the face to them because they don't have water to cook it. So these are things that we have to consider, even cooking our own food. We don't want to cook our food in tainted water because what if boiling isn't enough?
Right.
You just, or it absorbs into the food that you just don't, you really don't know what you're getting. And even runners, you find out that, you could take those gel packets, but you still might cramp. I mean, a lot of runners bail out of runs because they're severely dehydrated. Bodybuilders have died from dangerous water protocols, pulling water the day of their show, 2 days before their show, and they literally die. And I actually knew a person that I competed with died that evening because he used poor water protocol. So it goes to show you that even if you are trying to survive in an emergency or you're just doing something for a photo shoot or a contest or a race, water management is critical. Um,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
now
Like
we
like
get
you were saying that everybody thinks, oh, I need to prepare. Let me go get antibiotics. You got to think about it in the correct order. Go ahead with antibiotics.
right. No, and well, the antibiotics thing, me personally, I try to avoid antibiotics at all costs, but that is because of the body's natural responses in a normal world, right?
Right.
Where I can eat yogurt, I can let the body take its course, I can be hydrated, I can, take natural herbal remedies, etc. But in an emergency survival, and for certain illnesses, antibiotics are a non-negotiable. Despite our principles, despite what we like, they do become a non-negotiable. So if you're not prepared, antibiotics are your second line of defense against bacterial infections that clean water can't prevent alone. In disasters, cuts turn septic, food spoils, and GI issues explode. And without antibiotics like amoxicillin or ciprofloxacin, a simple infection becomes fatal. And I've seen it in field medicine where people die from treatable conditions because supplies run out. Explain to us a little bit more about the different types of antibiotics and why someone would need an emergency supply kit.
So, okay. I liked how you said GI issues explode in the environment. That's really good. I was like, okay, oh, well, all right. Okay. So antibiotics, there's going to, if you think about in that scenario, the grid down, you're going to be doing a lot more manual work and manual things than you normally would do. You're going to get cuts and scrapes, and if you don't have clean water, even if you do, if you don't have good protocols, those can become infected quite easily. Diarrheal diseases can be because of bacteria. Then you can even have respiratory illnesses that can be viruses that lead to a secondary pneumonia. So there's multiple scenarios in which antibiotics are appropriate. And again, I would refer back to the ultimate survival medical guide that you said, or whatever reference source that you want to pick. And they will have a good list, a broad list of antibiotics that are going to cover, a lot of times we talk about above the diaphragm and below the diaphragm, skin infections, etc. So I would get a good reference book. And then again, that setting comes in really important, what setting you're in, right? Because, all right, well, I can buy a huge supply of antibiotics, but if I've got to bug out, then you've got to really narrow it down on what you can carry with you. So I know everybody knows about like the Jace kits and the Wellness Company kits. Those are great as well. But you're going to have a certain supply. If you're in shelter in place, okay, you can have a lot of different antibiotics for, I mean, depends on how long the scenario is, but there's all kinds of infections, sexually transmitted infections that come about, et cetera, et cetera. So things can get very wide and a diverse range of antibiotics you would need the longer the scenario goes on. I think that one thing people don't think about in that regard as well is that there's that movie Leave the World Behind, the Obama pre-programming film that they did for us. There's a great scene in there where the dad is bringing his son and they're begging the prepared person for antibiotics to help their kid out. So we think about antibiotics as far as treating, us and the people in our family that we're going to take care of. But in those scenarios, the other thing that you could think about antibiotics are going to be very tradable, very tradable. So those generalized antibiotics that work for a lot of different scenarios, the erythromycin, the amoxicillin, the ciprofloxacin, those types of antibiotics are going to be highly sought after and highly tradable. In disaster scenarios, then I think it's the number one thing that gets stolen is medications. The first thing when chaos erupts, the first thing they do is hit the pharmacies. Now they're probably going after the opioids first, but after after they hit the opioid cabinet and controlled substances, the antibiotics are going to go as well. So that's what I would say is look at your scenario. Are you bugging out? Then you're going to have a narrow. But if you're in a shelter in place, look at your reference book. You want a broad spectrum, and you might want additional supply because that could be very valuable and you could trade for things that you need.
Yeah, well, and also to have a variety because I know me personally, I'm actually allergic to one or two different antibiotics. So unfortunately, I had to find out by trial and error. But it's important to have a variety of antibiotics just in case, let's say your family member could use one and you can't use it, but you have a different type that you can
Yeah.
use. In addition to antibiotics, you might want to consider any prescriptions that you rely on for sustainability of life. Let's say blood pressure medication, heart medication, diabetes, insulin or insulin tablets, depending on what you take, just life saving. Like if you're on dialysis, there might be things that you need for that. Just any of your life sustaining conditions that you take medication for, seizures, that if you don't take it, you may die. You may want to consider ordering that in advance. And it depends on which doctor that you have. And because sometimes they don't believe in emergency preparedness. And they're like, well, I don't care. What do you need a year supply? I'm only going to give you your normal 90 days. So you have to find a doctor that is willing to understand emergency scenarios that arise, and you could just refer back to 2020. In fact, even yesterday, I got a text because I'm part of like the emergency survival team that antibiotics, these tariffs are going 100% on antibiotics and medications because you know why? Because China and India are either the precursors or the manufacturers of these medications. And if the current administration keeps wanting to play tug of war with tariffs, then we could be in a lot of trouble because, again, you're saying the first thing that can happen is people run for antibiotics or run for their medications when stuff is going to hit the fan, and they're not going to be there because we decided to be at war, a trade war, a tariff war with the two major countries that supply our country with major pharmaceuticals that we need.
Yeah,
So,
when
right.
families are sitting down and they're coming up with a plan, there's definitely they need to look at those life-sustaining medications as well. And there's other things as well. I mean, people don't think about dental hygiene, so make sure that you've got toothpaste and brushes and floss and tooth extraction kit. So and that's one of the things we do at my current company, RX Voyage. We can help people get access to these medications. A lot of times let's say you're on blood pressure, life-sustaining medication, we can help people get a backup supply of that medication that they can use so that they've always got a buffer. I mean, even not a grid down scenario, just a supply chain disruption that people have had. I mean, there are times where people could not get their blood pressure medication because of supply chain. So helping people look at their individual scenario, coming up with a plan, and then putting that plan in action and writing the prescriptions and helping them get the meds, that's something we can do.
Okay, great. Because we all know that times can be hard and systems can be hacked. So we had a horrible hack of the medical industry and insurance industry where people were left without life-saving medications just because a hack occurred and they couldn't get in their systems and bill insurance properly. So we need to think about even just hacker scenarios. So being that my version is giving me less than 1 minute remaining, how can people get in contact with you?
And just go to our website, rxvoyage.net, or you can email support at rxvoyage.net. That's rxvoyage.net. And we'll work with you to make sure you're prepared and take care of your family.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Motsinger, for coming on our channel today and explaining the importance of water and antibiotics. And